Hey, good afternoon. Welcome in. This is the Joe Gaither Show live on BamaCentral, part of the BamaCentral network. Thanks everybody for jumping in and joining us today. Back for another day. Thursday, we made it 4 days. That's incredible. Thanks so much for everybody tuning in. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can get your podcast. You can find the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral as part of the BamaCentral network. And also be looking for all things Bama and Blue Collar Unplugged podcast as you're also taking in the Joe Gaither Show. We're going to have a fun Thursday today. I know as we are currently speaking, the Alabama Crimson Tide are taking on the Auburn Tigers. Oh my gosh, after a heartbreak last night. Utter heartbreak last night. What a dramatic game. The Tide losing to number 1 seed Florida in extra innings. I believe the 11th inning, 7-6. Oh, brutal night for Alabama baseball, but a good performance overall against the top seed in the tournament, so we'll talk about that today. We'll be watching Alabama and Auburn as Alabama is up 1-0, courtesy of a Tommy Seidel home run. Tommy Seidel with 2 huge hits in back-to-back plate appearances. Almost giving Alabama the game, the winning runs last night, and then putting Alabama ahead. Oh, actually, it's now 1-1. Oh no, Auburn is digging back into the game. So we're going to talk about Alabama baseball. We're going to talk about Alabama softball today. The Tide is taking on Northwestern in the Super Regional round. Haven't been to the Super Regional round in 2 years, so we're excited to get back to the Super Regional round and take on Northwestern. We'll figure out what the status of our lady's health is, because all eyes are on Montana Fouts and her knee, what her availability will be, and if we can get ourselves to Oklahoma City. We'll also touch on Darius Miles' court case yesterday. If you joined the program yesterday, you know that he was denied bond. Well, today on the program, we are joined by Katie Windham. You can follow her on Twitter at Katie Windham _. She is large and in charge at BamaCentral, and I'm very, very happy to welcome her into the program. Katie, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me on a wonderful Thursday.
Yeah, Joe, thank you for having me on. I don't know about that large and in charge description, but we'll see.
Well, you are I consider you definitely in charge, so whatever you say, I'm going to say yes, whatever I can do for you. I'm very thrilled to be on the team and have you on the program today. Let's start with the easiest conversation. Well, we'll start with the easiest stuff, softball. We'll move from softball, baseball, into Darius Miles. We'll save the Darius Miles for last because it is the juiciest. Softball, last week you were in the Rhodes House at regionals, and the girls pulled one out. Obviously had to go to the if necessary game with Middle Tennessee State, but the girls were able to pull it out without using Montana Fouts, and I think that's very, very important. So really, the main reason I wanted to bring you on is to kind of set up our pitching matchup, discuss Montana Fouts' injury and availability. You put out on BamaCentral earlier in the week that Patrick Murphy told you that Montana was available on Sunday, but obviously didn't need her. What do you think about this Alabama softball team trying to get back to Oklahoma City and kind of what we've seen over the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, there's a lot to look at with this because you say they didn't need her, but I think listening to Patrick Murphy in that post-game press conference, I think as that game was winding down, that if necessary elimination game, I think he saw Montana Fouts' career flashing before his eyes because he talked about he was in such a tough spot of do I bring her in or not because it was a scoreless game for so long. We obviously saw, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, a really strong weekend in the circle from Drayla Torrance, but the offense wasn't getting it done. And so it's, when do you bring in Montana? Do you let her pitch one more time? Do you bring her in to try and close it out? And is she really if she comes in, is she going to be able to pitch 100%? Or if she comes in, would she possibly give up some runs? And so I honestly had questions going into regional weekend if this team would be able to make it out of regionals without Montana Fouts. Obviously they did. But for me, the biggest concern from last weekend is not actually the circle, even though I do think you are going to need Montana Fouts to get back to Oklahoma City. It's really the offense because on Sunday in the 2 games, they scored 2 total runs and they only needed 1 run in the last game on the Allie Shipman home run because Jayla Torrance was able to shut out Middle Tennessee. But the offense this past weekend at regionals kind of looked like it had looked for most of the year. Struggling to string together at bats, struggling to score runs. Because the previous 2 weeks, the series at Ole Miss and the SEC tournament, we saw some of the best offense from Alabama softball all year. And then last weekend, even though Saturday's win over Middle Tennessee. I was actually out of town on Friday and Saturday and was just at Rhodes on Sunday, but I watched most of Saturday's game. They put up, 11 or 12 runs, but really a lot of them were just because of walks given up by the Middle Tennessee pitching staff and not necessarily – we did see some key hits with people on base, but it wasn't necessarily – I think they only had 7 hits total in that game. And so if Alabama is going to win Supers this weekend, if they're going to have any sort of success in OKC, the offense is going to have to get clicking again. The top of the lineup didn't do well last weekend. Larissa Pruitt and Jenna Johnson, I think, had to combine 2 hits. Kinley Cahalan, the freshman who started out the season so strong, has kind of struggled the last couple of weeks. There's people they need to start seeing production from again. And then obviously the health and availability of Montana Fouts is also going to be key into whether or not they can win Super Regionals this weekend.
You start with the offense, and I think that's a great place because last week at the SEC tournament, I really felt like, okay, we're seeing some growth and some momentum from the offensive side of the plate. The offense has been such a point of discussion for the Alabama fan base the last 2 years. It's, oh my gosh, do we have enough power? Why are we playing small ball? X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Complain. So I thought last week, SEC tournament, wow, the longer runway theory is really proving true. The girls are starting to be comfortable. And then even in the Friday game where they scored a ton of runs, I thought, okay, we're going to continue this in the regional round with Montana being out. What do you think the problem is? What do you think the issue is with the girls finding that consistent hit? Murph talks about passing the bat down and really stringing things together and putting them in competition-like scenarios in practice, but what do you think the problem is translating that into games has been for this team for really 2 seasons?
Yeah, it's hard to know what the real problem is because it has been 2 seasons at this point. Really, the last month of last season, the 2022 season, starting with that A&M series where they lost 2 of 3, and then that last month of the season they averaged about 3 runs per game. And then, they lost some people in the portal and didn't really bring in any big stars from the portal. And I think it's pretty fair to say that what they've got from the portal, Emma Broadfoot has been a consistent starter at first base, but Faith Hensley, I think, was who most people thought would kind of be the biggest name as the former MAC Player of the Year. And she just, for whatever reason, things haven't clicked for her at Alabama, and she hasn't really contributed, and certainly not on offense outside of a few games. And so they didn't necessarily address a ton of their hitting needs. And so then this season, we've seen the same issues they had the last month of last season, even starting, the first game of the year when they lost to Lehigh, but then also obviously we've seen them beat some really good teams as to how they got this seeding. But kind of going back to what I saw some of the offensive issues being specifically on Sunday, where I tweeted about it during the game, there was a lot of short at-bats, which sometimes, and I've talked about this with Murph multiple times in press conferences after games, because there's a lot of players on this team that like to swing early in the count, which can be a good thing. We saw it with Allie Shipman. Her home run was first pitch. She's somebody that swings at the first pitch a ton. But to me, when you're facing a team like Middle Tennessee, with all due respect to their pitchers, they're not SEC caliber pitchers, or they would be pitching in the SEC. Now, Gretchen Mead for Middle Tennessee did have a fabulous weekend. Really credit to her for how she did all weekend in Tuscaloosa. She did not pitch in that first game against Alabama, where Alabama scored all the runs, and then basically shut them down on Sunday. But to me, when you're facing a team like that, I would think you would want to have a little bit more patience at the plate. When you're facing an Ashley Rogers from Tennessee, yeah, you might want to swing early in the count because that might be the only good pitch you get because she's such a good pitcher. But when you're facing someone like Middle Tennessee, odds are you're going to find some other pitches to hit. They're not throwing as fast as other pitchers you see. And so we just saw a lot of quick innings to the plate for Alabama. And when you have those quick innings, you're not stringing things together. And it also puts so much more pressure on your pitcher because they're having to go right back out in the field. And so now I think we've seen the last couple of weeks, and we know because of the talent of these athletes, Alabama recruits at a high level, that the potential is there. We saw it at Ole Miss. We saw it at the SEC tournament. We've seen sparks of it throughout the season. I think last week when we saw some good things from Callie Heavlin, we saw some power from her at the bottom of the lineup. So the talent is there. There are people there that can hit. But like you said, the key is consistency. Are they going to be able to do it consistently? And it's not going to get easier from here on out. If they, Supers is not easy. Northwestern has a good pitching staff. Certainly things in Oklahoma City aren't going to be easy if they make the Women's College World Series. And so but things weren't easy in the SEC tournament either. They were facing Shanice Dellis from Arkansas, the reigning SEC Pitcher of the Year, and were able to score on her, kind of wear her down after a really long game. Against Tennessee, they faced Carlin Pickens the first inning, who was really having trouble finding the zone. But, she was the SEC Freshman of the Year this year. And Alabama is one of the only teams that's been able to have a lot of offensive success against Tennessee this season. One of the best pitching staffs in college softball this year, which I think, because Tennessee's the 4 and Alabama's the 5, if both teams advance to Oklahoma City, I believe that would mean they would play in the first round, which could be an interesting matchup, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. But really, offensively, we're going to have to see, I think, for them to have success this weekend, it's got to start at the top of the lineup. That was key in that Ole Miss series in the SEC tournament when they were doing well. Jenna Johnson was getting on base. Larissa Pruitt was getting on base. For those people like Ashley Praney and Bailey Dowling that can drive in the runs. And so I'm not a hitting expert. I haven't played softball since like 6th grade. So I'm not proclaiming that I could do any of these things. I can't. I couldn't hit. I certainly couldn't hit a 70-mile-per-hour fastball. I probably couldn't hit a 50-mile-per-hour fastball coming right down the middle. But these girls can. They're really talented. And so I believe they have it there to put it together. And I think that maybe them having that frustration of this past weekend, we could see them kind of rallying together and see something good this weekend against Northwestern.
Katie, you're not alone. My baseball career ended in the 7th grade when the curveball got introduced to all of our all of the the 7th and 8th grade pitchers started figuring out a curveball, and I said, okay, I'm out. I can play second base and defend, but hitting not my strong suit. So I relate to these girls just kind of feeling frustrated in that sense. You kind of set up Northwestern just a little bit. Looking through their schedule, they played the who's who. They played literally everybody who's any good in softball this year. Oklahoma, UCLA, Auburn twice, Kentucky twice. Obviously, they beat Kentucky in the regionals. So they're going to come to the Rhodes House without any fear. They're going to come to Rhodes House expecting to play well. Set up these pitchers that they're bringing in, as we've kind of highlighted our offense. What can they bring that will create a challenge for our ladies?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't think I've watched any Northwestern softball this year.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But they do have Danielle Williams, who actually, let me double check this so I'm not saying something wrong. I believe she was the pitcher that in 2019 Montana Fouts, freshman year. So she's also a 5th-year pitcher like Montana, and she won National Freshman of the Year in 2019 instead of Montana. So there's kind of that. They're both very talented pitchers, and it was kind of a, tightly contested race, but things like that, ultimately don't matter. So they do have a talented pitcher.
22-1 this year. She's 22-1 with a 2.23 ERA. So, and she's pitched 9 complete games. Let's see what strikeouts. 182 strikeouts for Miss Danielle Williams.
Yeah, and like you talked about, they've played a tough schedule. Northwestern, even though the Big Ten overall is not a tough softball conference, they have played a tough schedule. And since Danielle Williams has been in college, they've played in big moments and big games. So she's not going to be afraid of pitching Tuscaloosa, and she's a tough pitcher. So, I'm talking about the offense has struggled, and they've struggled a lot this season. But it's not going to be easy. And it shouldn't be in super regionals. Northwestern does have a good pitching staff. I got to give a shout out to the Alabama Softball Radio guys, Tom and Gray, and their podcast Out of the Box, and they talk about that these two teams are very similar in style and that they have good pitching and maybe are more low scoring on offense. So even though I'm saying the offense needs to step up, I don't expect to see a lot of offensive production necessarily this weekend. I would expect some low scoring games in all 3 if it goes to 3 games.
We're used to low-scoring games here the last couple of years, so we're comfortable with that. Question from our Facebook audience, Mr. James Flash Ludeman chimes in and asks, who is someone, Miss Katie Windham, that you believe needs to step up big in this series for Alabama to have a chance to win?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I don't think there's necessarily one person that needs to for them. I think they already have a chance to win. I think if Montana's not fully healthy, I think we're going to need to see strong performances from Jayla Torrance again. And offensively, I'm going to go back to Kinley Cahalan. She's somebody that was in the leadoff position for most of the year. She kind of struggled when she got into SEC play, and obviously it's well documented. She enrolled early, should technically still be in high school. Can't imagine that type of transition she's really had to make this year. But she'd been up at the top lineup for most of the year, has kind of moved down the last couple weeks, and she had a hit in the last game, I believe. And I think that can be something that she can carry over into this weekend because she's somebody that can do it all at the plate for Alabama. She has speed, she has power, she has some home runs, she has the 2 inside the park home runs. She can drive in runs, and so she's so versatile at the plate that if she's somebody that can start consistently getting on base again for Alabama, that can start driving in runs, whether she is kind of in that bottom half lineup or towards the top, I think it can be huge for this offense. And I also think Larissa Pruitt is someone that, because of her speed, if she can just get the ball on the ground, if she can put it in play and create some havoc on the base pass, I think that'll be big for this offense as well to bring up some of those power hitters behind her.
We're talking to Katie Windham of BamaCentral. You can find her on the Twitter machine at KatieWindham_. And we're talking Alabama softball. The Crimson Tide host Northwestern in the Super Regional round this weekend, trying to get to Oklahoma City, get back to the College World Series. It's a place we missed last year. Last year's season ended disappointingly. Let's talk about Montana Fouts. Obviously, Murph says, and lets you know that she's available for some, or she was available for the if necessary game. You kind of highlighted in the first little segment about seeing her career flash before his eyes, and I think that's totally valid. You wanted to absolutely make sure Montana Fouts got some action in the Rhodes House if that was going to be your last game. Where do you think she percentage-wise, how close do you think she was to 100% last weekend? And will she be a whole lot closer this week?
That's tough because I do think she was available.
It's a guess.
Yeah, I do think she was available if necessary. Like, I don't think Murph was lying about that. The first game on Sunday, when Alabama was losing, she did get up in the bullpen, but she wasn't actually – she was tossing but not, like, throwing. Like, she wasn't – going through a full motion, putting weight on her leg. And then in the second game, she got up in the bullpen and was actually throwing some pitches. And according to Murph, she had thrown some that morning. Now, with that brace on her knee, she doesn't look like she's at her full mobility. But I'm not a doctor. I'm not a trainer. I would assume that they've done everything they can in rehab this week. And Alabama does have the fortune of, Murph says that they have the best orthopedic team, and that's not an exaggeration. Alabama,
they absolutely do.
All Alabama sports are fortunate to be, close to Dr. Lyle Kane in Birmingham, and so, if someone's gonna be able to get her healthy, it's this group that Alabama has around them, and obviously she's one of the most important athletes, really. I think you could argue in Alabama history, and certainly for this Alabama softball program, and so, I know they want her to have that opportunity to pitch again at Rhodes, and I know she wants that opportunity. In all the years I've covered Montana Fouts, she never says no to taking the ball. She would pitch every game of a series if they let her. I mean, she really would. We saw in the 2021 SEC tournament at Tuscaloosa, she did pitch every inning of that for the Crimson Tide on the way to the title, and so she always wants the ball. She's the definition of a gamer. She's the definition of a team player. We saw in the SEC tournament when she got hurt, she literally tried to keep pitching, and she just couldn't put that weight on her knee. And so I have no clue kind of what percentage-wise of health she's at, but I do think she's available to pitch, and I don't think they would – even though she does always want the ball, I don't think they would put her in a position that would be harmful to her. I personally think that Jayla will probably start the first game on Friday night, but you also never really know with Murph and his lineups because even his, the batting order, it's funny watching the SEC baseball tournament and their kind of lineups. It's pretty much the same every single game, and softball will literally change from game to game, weekend to weekend, within a weekend. And so it'll be interesting to see for sure. Now, whenever or wherever Montana comes in, you can bet that the Rhodes Stadium crowd will be 100% behind her. And they always get lit for Montana Fouts whenever she comes in. And so if she comes in this weekend, it might be the loudest we've heard it all season.
Well, Katie, you hit on a couple of just talking points that I had yesterday. The 2021 SEC tournament, I'll never forget it. I did take it in largely as a fan, but I ended up sitting on there on the terrace, and ironically, Montana Fouts' father was a body or two away and just stressing on every pitch, living and dying on every pitch. But she was just lights out. She was a machine that through that weekend, just mowing people down. And then the secondary talking point yesterday was, where does she really fall as far as Alabama all-time athletes? I mean, currently right now on campus, easily on the Mount Rushmore. She's one of your four, but without a national championship, I know softball only has one. Jackie Traina kind of has that moniker as the national championship pitcher, but no disrespect to Jackie Traina, you put Jackie and Montana against each other. I think Montana is a higher quality pitcher and probably means more to Alabama than Jackie Traina does. It's fascinating to consider where she really falls on the pantheon of how important she is to Alabama softball. I don't think we'll be able to really determine that until this year is finished.
Yeah, we actually kind of had that discussion on press row on Sunday at softball amongst some of the people that have covered softball on and off over the years. I don't think it would be that big of a stretch, even though, correct, she does not have a national championship. But there's only one team ever that has done that at Alabama.
Fair.
That she is, I would say it's fair to say she's by far the most popular player in Alabama softball history. She has been the face of college softball for the last couple of years. The moment in Oklahoma City when she threw the perfect game against UCLA, the defending national champions, on her 21st birthday, all 21 outs on her 21st birthday, on the biggest stage in the not in the semifinals, to get a spot to go to the semifinals. You really could not write a better story than that. And that's when all the eyes of the college softball world, and really postseason is the time most people who don't watch softball will watch it. And so even before that, but really since that moment, she's been the face of college softball, and she's handled it with such grace and humility. It's kind of funny talking to people just from a media perspective. I think you could argue really that Alabama across football, basketball, and softball has had three of its best athletes ever on campus this year, with Bryce Young, Brandon Miller, Montana Fouts, kind of all on, campus at the same time. But they're all, like, from a media perspective, almost like humble to a fault, because you're like, so tell me about, like, that amazing thing you just did. And they're like, oh, my teammates. And it's like, no, talk about you. Like, you're the one that just did the incredible thing. So, like, tell me, like, how you did that. But I would say we were kind of at softball the other day, we were talking about the Mount Rushmore of softball would probably be Montana, Jackie Traina. The difference between Jackie Traina and Montana is Jackie did actually hit, too, and was a good hitter. Now, Montana can hit, and, there's kind of the legendary story of their trip to Japan a couple of years ago when she hit the Grand Slam. And we actually had a conversation with Murph a couple of weeks ago about, and Montana a couple of times this season, about hitting. And Murph talked about that the fall of her Montana's freshman year, she was hitting at practice, like batting in the cages and stuff, because she'd obviously hit in Japan too. And the batter before her in the cages either like got hit by a pitch on the pitching machine, or like it whizzed by him really fast, or hit somebody in the foot or something. I can't remember what he said. I have to go back and listen to the audio. But basically, and Montana was waiting to go next. And then they were like, you know what? Is it really a good idea if she hits? Because she's just so valuable in the circle that you would never want to see her get, hurt running the bases or hitting or whatever. And Alabama has had enough other hitters in place that, you don't need her to hit. But I would put her, Jackie Traina, Haley McClenny for sure. It's really kind of wild that Haley McClenny never won a national championship at Alabama either, but was just phenomenal at the plate and in the field. And then I personally didn't grow up watching Kelly Crutchman. I probably started watching Alabama softball around 2006 and kind of the Kelsey Dunn, Brittany Rogers type days. But I think Kelly Crutchman's got to be up there too, but it's certainly an interesting debate.
Well, we're very hopeful that the softball ladies will be successful this weekend, so that we can get out to Oklahoma City and watch them continue We're playing at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock on Friday. You can follow Katie Windham in the booth at Katie Windham _ and follow BamaCentral for all the live updates. She'll be able to keep you abreast of anything going on if Montana Fouls is warming up or if she's just bored and getting some. It seemed like the first game she was just kind of working off some nervous energy, like a lion. Like, am I going to get out there or not? So we'll see. You'll be able to follow Katie for all your updates. I second what you said. I do expect Jayla Torrance to get the start on Friday for the Tide, and then we'll see what happens after that. Katie, let's talk about you for a second before we go to baseball. Is that cool?
Sure.
Katie Windham, BamaCentral. You've been with BamaCentral ever since I've been in the media game for the last 3 or 4 years. So, other than that, what are some of your backgrounds? I know you're a lifelong lifelong growing up as an Alabama student, Alabama fan. Talk about just where you're from and kind of what you like about media and what your goals are.
Yeah, so I grew up in Montgomery, which is really Auburn territory for sure. It's only about 45 minutes down the road from where I grew up. My graduating class of 75, like probably 40, went to Auburn. But both my parents went to Alabama, so I grew up an Alabama fan. And we were not just football. We would come up one weekend a year and go to gymnastics meet and basketball. And my dad was in the band and in the pep band. And when he was in college, basketball won the SEC tournament every year and went to the Sweet 16. So he always loved Alabama basketball. And then, like I said, started watching Alabama softball. So really just all the sports. And even though I grew up with 2 sisters, no brothers, and a house of all girls, my dad, we all, loved sports and going to sporting events and spent most fall Saturdays going to football games. And so kind of always knew sports wanted to be part of my life in some way. And so I kind of grew up in the era of watching Erin Andrews on College Game Day and loving her and thinking that's something I wanted to do. So I really came to college wanting to do like broadcast journalism, but then I kind of like just didn't do anything with it. Like I didn't do any internships. I remember I almost went to one of the interest meetings for Crimson Tide Production / Tide TV when I was a freshman. Then like I just didn't. And then I just never really like kind of did anything in that sector of sports media. And also after my freshman year at Alabama, they merged together journalism and telecommunications and film to make JCM. And so it was kind of a more cohesive, comprehensive multimedia type deal. And so summer going into my senior year of college, I did an internship at the TV station in Montgomery, but on their digital side. And then fall of my senior year, I interned at Tuscaloosa News and covered high school football every Friday night. I would be out in Pickens County or Hillcrest or Sipsey Valley or wherever around West Alabama. And they would also let us cover some Alabama stuff. And through that, Cecil Hurt and Evan Stanton at the Tuscaloosa News, which Evan now works for BamaCentral, as well as the Alumni Magazine, got me connected with John Zener at the AP. And I started stringing for him and would go to the visiting post games to get quotes. And then I started covering basketball for the AP. And then spring semester of my senior year of college, I started working for the Crimson White, but that was 2020. And so I was supposed to graduate in May of 2020. But obviously the world shut down in March of 2020. So I only worked for the Crimson White for about 3 months. And before the pandemic had started, I already applied to grad school and had gotten accepted. So I was going to go do my master's in sports management / hospitality. And because of COVID, the whole program got moved online. But I already had an apartment and things set up in Tuscaloosa, so I still lived here. And then that January, Tyler Martin, who used to work for BamaCentral, we'd had classes together, and he got me connected with Chris. And originally I was just supposed to cover some gymnastics. And then I ended up covering softball that spring, which obviously was the last time Alabama went to the World Series. And I still didn't really know like what I wanted to do. Or I had another job opportunity lined up. And so I was at peace with that 2021 Super Regional being the last sporting event I ever covered. And ironically, it's kind of because of Patrick Murphy, I'm still doing this because it was 2021, it was still like kind of COVID-y. Like Actually, the SEC tournament that year was the first like sporting event that was full capacity. And thankfully, Oklahoma City that year was full capacity, no masks, like pretty relatively normal. But we were still doing press conferences on Zoom. So anyway, the Zoom after that super regional press conference after Alabama had clinched Oklahoma City. There was kind of three of us that had, or I guess really four, that had covered softball kind of all year long. But one of them was an intern for Tide 100.9. Her name was Katie too. And so on the Zoom, as we were wrapping up, Patrick Murphy said something about Katie, you've got to get your butts to Oklahoma City. So I was like, well, the head coach says it, I've got to do it. So I ended up going out to Oklahoma City that June and covering the World Series for BamaCentral, still just kind of as an intern, or really, I don't really know what you want to call my title then, because I did already have a degree in journalism, a master's degree. But and then I started working full-time for BamaCentral that July. So then I also worked part-time for FCA at the University of Alabama. So definitely no 8 to 5 job. It's just whenever stuff's happening, and it's all kind of related to sports. So it's really cool what I get to do for sure.
What does that mean to you that Coach Murphy basically, and Katie Hollick as well, but called you ladies out not because, hey, I need coverage, because we're covering, everybody's covering the College World Series. We called you two ladies out as far as, hey, y'all have really put us on and worked hard this year. And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Coach Murphy throw a little, kind of help out with some of the expenses for some of that trip maybe? Or was that just a rumor that I had heard?
I think he didn't. I think he'd said something about, like, he would pay for, like, he would talk to our bosses, or, like, he would pay for it if he needed to. But he didn't end up needing to for us, I don't think. So, but that's just, yeah, he's a great guy and a great coach, and really does actually appreciate the coverage of a sport, which is kind of wild. I always tell people, which obviously Alabama basketball has had a ton of success the last couple of years in their NATOs, but still the most followed team on campus behind football is softball. 100%. It has more Twitter, it has more social media followers than any other sport except for football. And that's even with the success basketball had last year with Brandon Miller and kind of having the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament and being really popular. Softball is still more popular, even though the road stadium holds just around 4,000 people. And so it's kind of wild to me, the people that don't cover softball, just because it is so popular, and especially with kind of the star power Montana Fouts has. But yeah, Murph, it's kind of funny. Even last weekend I was on vacation for all of last week, or from like Saturday to Saturday, I guess. So I was on vacation when the selection show happened, and I was stunned that they were the number 5 overall seed. But when I tweeted that I was on the way back, Murph replied to my tweet and said, let's go or something. And I joked to people, I was like, I can't imagine Nick Saban ever being excited about any of us being. He's probably excited when some of us are not at press conferences. But
somebody says, I'm leaving the beat. Coach Saban says, yeah, sweet.
Or he's like, who's that?
But there's a rumor that Coach Saban has a face card up at the front of his podium to identify, that brown-headed guy, that's Joe Gaither. To identify all the reporters, because we're such nameless, faceless people in his world.
Yeah, I think at this point, I'm joking, but I actually think for people that have been on the beat for a couple of years, I think he does know who they are. He's not a super personable guy with the media, like some other coaches might be, but it's just the nature of it. Sometimes he doesn't have as much time to sit there and interact. He's also up at a podium, not as close to some of the other coaches are. But it's definitely a different vibe covering some of the other sports compared to football.
Well, Katie, what were you up to last night about 8:30, 9 o'clock? Were you watching Alabama baseball like the rest of us?
I was actually switching back and forth between baseball and the Braves. But
did the Braves treat you any better, hopefully?
The Braves did. They walked off the Dodgers after playing crap the last couple weeks. So, but what happened was, I had on the Alabama game. They go up 3 runs. So the Braves are tied going to the bottom of the ninth, so I switched back to the Braves, but I still have the stat broadcast up of baseball. And I see the Auburn got the leadoff guy on. They make the pitching not Auburn, Florida. They make the pitching change. The next guy gets on. I see Auburn scores go at 4-3. And I'm like, oh. So I switch back. And then I just see the guy crank it, and right off the bat, I was like, man, he crushed that.
It was a no doubt.
Yeah, like literally off the bat. I mean, he just annihilated it. So that's a tough loss for them because you think anytime a game goes to extra innings, normally when you get one run, you're like, oh, like, we're good. But when you get that bases clearing hit and you're up 3 runs, it's like, oh, like, you're golden. But it just kind of fell apart, and there's a reason Florida's the 1 seed and has had so much success this year. And so I think it was kind of just the perfect storm for them in that final half inning.
We don't expect that to happen with when you bring in Alton Davis because he's 7 for 7 on his saves opportunities this year. Yes, just a freshman, but has done the job very well for Alabama as a closer this year. A heartbreaking loss, but really you take it. You take it with the good with the bad over the last couple of weeks. I think there's been a lot of good. Right now, we are in the bottom of the 4th inning. Alabama's up 2-1 against Auburn. They scored in the 3rd inning to go up 2-1, so they're still rolling. If Alabama wins, they're going to cruise. They're going to continue through the losers bracket and hopefully get to a Sunday game. I had the bracket up somewhere. I will pull it back up. They're playing Auburn at the moment. Obviously, where's my bracket? There we go.
Looks like they play Texas A&M tomorrow.
Yes, game 10. Game 10 winner. Winner of game 10 will play the loser of game 12, which is going to be Florida and Vanderbilt. We'll play Florida or Vanderbilt, or Florida a second time, or Vanderbilt again to play in the elimination bracket. Is that? Yes. Because if Florida loses, they'll have 1 loss. Or Vanderbilt loses, they'll be at 1 loss. Yes, that'll be an elimination game. All right, so that'll be tomorrow in the second window. Looks like in the evening. First game tomorrow is at 3. The second game is TBD, so it's probably going to be about 5 or 6 p.m. if Alabama is able to hold on and win. Okay, let's talk about it because I saw you at the Alabama Vanderbilt game on the Thursday that where everything kind of went down with Coach Bohannon being dismissed. What are you seeing? I know baseball's not your main beat, and really, to be honest, it's not mine either. But what have you just noticed over a 4-week stretch with this team? Cutting, firing Brad Bohannon, and now just surging forward.
Yeah, I think we've seen how resilient this group of guys is, and that they had nothing to do with what happened. They're just out there to play baseball, and they're a good group of guys. They're a talented group of guys, and they're playing together right now, and have shown that they can compete in the SEC. And it's wild to me that they're now in a position not just to make the NCAA tournament, where basically every year for the last decade they're on the bubble or not even close to the bubble. They're firmly in now and now have the chance to host a regional, which I did not realize how long it had been since they'd hosted one, just because somebody who follows softball more, they literally host a regional every single year. But then when I saw that I hadn't been since 2006, I was like, well, I guess that makes sense because I really don't remember a time off the top of my head that they've hosted. And so it will just kind of continue this kind of incredible story of this team that's happened since Brad Bohannon was fired. And I think there's been a lot of negative things in Alabama athletics this year. Obviously what Bohannon did, even though we don't know the full extent of it yet, is a negative thing. But I think this team is something that people can root together or rally around and root for, even if they're not necessarily Alabama fans, because these players they're just some guys that want to play baseball and are having success lately, and it's coming at the plate and on the mound. Like you said, Alton Davis before last night, he kind of stepped up big the last couple of weeks. We've seen some of the starters step up, and obviously Andrew Pinckney and Tommy Seidel have just been on a tear at the plate. It was kind of crazy when I went to one of the Alabama-Auburn baseball games in the regular season, and when I saw the batting averages, I was like, these baseball players are hitting better than softball, which normally softball averages are a decent amount better than baseball just because it's – I don't want to say it's easier to get a base hit, but more things are counted as base hits. It's easier to get infield hits in softball, if that makes sense. Just in general, averages are higher, but some of these baseball guys have just been tearing the cover off the ball. So,
and I couldn't believe that last night. They intentionally walk. Who's right in front of Seidel? They intentionally walk the guy to load the bases and put Seidel up. And I'm like, okay, yes, Seidel's only 1 for 5 going into that night, but he's like 356 for the year, and he's 5 of 11 with the bases loaded. And so, I mean,
it was certainly a choice.
Yes, and he clears the bases, and I'm just like, all right, we're feeling great. It's about to be over. Man, just heartbreak ensues, and that's why we love sports so much, because I was up another 45 minutes just muttering to myself in frustration. And we hope our guys are able to pull one out, especially against Auburn today. They're currently up 2-1, and we'll see what ends up happening at that game. You can follow our guys Austin Hannon and Will Miller up at Hoover as they have live updates on BamaCentral.com. All right, I got one more topic for you, Katie. Really two, but we may not get to the last one because it's kind of fun and off the wall. You were at the Darius Miles court case yesterday. First, bravo. Thank you for doing that. That's not a fun setting to go into at any point. Lots of tensions, very, very high, and emotions running all over the place. So can you set the scene for the people like me who were not in the courtroom yesterday as Darius Miles' bond was revoked a second time?
Yeah, it's definitely not my normal scene covering court. There's some people that's what they do. You know, they cover court. And so it was kind of an unusual thing for me. I actually walked into the courthouse the same time as Javon Quinterly and, was riding up the elevator with him, which so he was there. Jaden Quinterly and Noah Gurley were there in court yesterday.
Did that surprise you to see those guys?
After what I heard during the hearing, not necessarily. I think maybe Javon and Darius were roommates. It sounded like, and obviously really good friends and their teammates. And, when you in any collegiate sport, especially a team as small as baseball, as basketball, when I say small, I mean as far as roster size, you spend a lot of time with those people and you get to know them well. And so, you could tell they really care about Darius. But the first 40-ish minutes yesterday were kind of the defense team. I wrote some of the stuff down because you weren't allowed to record anything in there. And I'm not like I said, I'm not a trial reporter. But they were doing all these motions for discovery, basically asking the state and the prosecution for a bunch of evidence that they felt like was being withheld or that they hadn't received. And so that was kind of that. I was not expecting that. And that was a lot of the first part. Like they wanted some things like cell phone recordings, video footage, things like that. Jail phone calls, gunshot residue tests, things like that. And so then after that was when they got into the actual bond hearing. And so that was when Darius's defense attorney, Mary Turner, sorry, I couldn't think of her name. It had been somebody else on his defense team kind of doing all the motion hearings. And then Mary Turner got up and
she's the rock star. She is the star.
Made her argument for. And my thing was, like, when I was writing the story, I was like, I don't necessarily know all the legal terms. Like, I didn't even know what to call, like, what she was doing. But she had, like, a slideshow ready with, like, and her first thing that she did was to fax the case. And this is according to her. Some of the things she listed, I actually didn't have a good view of the projector because it was kind of, like, even with me instead of me looking at it. But her facts of the case were that Darius was not the shooter. He was not at the scene of the shooting. He had attempted to de-escalate the situation. He's never been in trouble before. She said stuff multiple times about Cedric Johnson and his friends were like hawks circling their prey. She said that Cedric Johnson, who's the boyfriend of the victim, Jamia Harris, that he and his friends, or he took issue with Michael Davis, who is Darius's friend that actually shot the gun, and that Mary Turner said that Darius Miles and Jaden Bradley went back to go get Davis, Michael Davis, the friend. And then at that point, Darius Miles saw a gun pass from Jamia Harris to Cedric Johnson. And then she said that Cedric Johnson said that, quote, something is about to go down, and that he turned off his lights before he went on Grace Street, where it kind of all went down. And then in kind of her plea for him to be able to release it on bond, she said that Darius's parents have moved down to Alabama and have rented a house for him to live in so that they would continue to support him. His mom has been a police officer in Washington, D.C. for 25 years. His stepdad's been a D.C. police officer for 15. His dad's an Army veteran. And that there was other people that were going to like vouch for him not being a flight risk. And then she kind of went through things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like things for his character. His character is an encourager, and during that part, she read statements from Javon Quinterly, Noah Gurley, Jawan Gary, former Alabama player. His character is God-fearing. She said that he's maintained a positive attitude, that God is in control through all of this. His character is selfless, and she talked about his positivity, that he take time to hug everyone in the handshake line after games, and she tried to play the video of him dancing with Big Al. His character of being reliable and respectful, his family-oriented, community involved, and that also included statements from Jaden Shackelford. And then she had statements from the Galloway family, which they were sitting in front of me in court yesterday, from Russellville, Alabama. And it's a little boy who had been at an Alabama basketball camp with Darius, and had kind of formed a relationship with him. And he and his family drive over 2 hours every Sunday to come spend time with Darius in jail.
Wow.
And they had statements from the little boy and his parents about kind of, his character and why they thought he should be released. Mary Turner said that Darius was entitled to bond on this charge. Now, this is kind of the stuff that I don't know, all the legal stuff, and that he wouldn't be the only one in the circuit to be released on a capital murder charge. And so she spent about 25 minutes doing all that. And she said that he would follow the rules no matter what the conditions were that were put on him. And so then it went over to the state, the prosecution, about why they thought he shouldn't be released. And sorry if this is like too long to play.
Oh, you're fine. This is great details.
Yeah. And the state said that she basically said that, Darius, as a brother-like bond and relationship with Michael Davis, and he took his brother and friend his loaded gun that he was the owner of, knowing he was in this tense situation, and that Jamia Harris, she's lost her life. She was a mother. She won't get to see her son grow up and play basketball like Darius did, and she asked the court to follow the consistent application of not applying bond in capital cases. And so then the judge spoke, and he said there were more factors in Darius's favor than most capital murder cases, but he denied bond because of the nature of the charges. And that's my understanding from yesterday, that capital murder, it's just really hard to get released on bond because of the seriousness of the charge. And so the judge did say he was willing to revisit at a later date. He seemed really, I thought for a second he was going to release Darius on bond, but I think just because of the seriousness of the charge, it's just something that's really hard to do. And so, but I think that there are more things in Darius's favor than after sitting in court yesterday and hearing some of the facts and hearing some of the things from both the prosecution and defense, that it will be harder to prosecute him. But I'm not a legal expert, so that was just my understanding from what I saw yesterday.
You were in the room and we weren't. We understand that. It sounds like, well, you got to put yourself in a judge's shoes in such a high-profile case. If I grant bond here to, the Alabama fans are going to say, yay, roll tide, but I think the general public might question motives, might question special treatment. I think there probably is a little bit of that going on. The judge trying to be very cautious. I'm hopeful that the bond does get revisited, as you said, in a later date. Let me ask you about Darius's not well-being, but his emotional state. How did he seem throughout the ordeal, or was there anything visible or anything noticeable about his demeanor that you noticed?
Yeah, his back was to us, so I couldn't see his face, but he was, crying during some of it, especially when they would read some of the character statements or talk about his relationship with his family, or the little boy that visits him, or he's not a little boy anymore. I think they said he was 15, but he first met Darius when he was younger, like 11 or something. He started like sobbing when they read his statement and his relationship, and it sounded like behind me that Javon Quinterly was crying when they were reading some of it. And so, he was upset. They did say at the beginning that, if he's convicted, the two, options are life in prison without parole or death. So like, it's a very serious matter and potential penalty for Darius if he is convicted. And so anyone's going to be emotional about that, especially when, it was his gun, but he wasn't the one that pulled the trigger. He wasn't at the scene of the shooting. He tried to de-escalate the situation. And so, he kind of left the court. He was in his orange jumpsuit. His hands were handcuffed with his head down, and didn't really. His parents, I think, were on the front row. He didn't turn around and look at any of his support system as he was leaving. I don't know if he's allowed to do that or not. I don't know, kind of what the rules are. But after he had left, his defense lawyer, Mary Turner, kind of got up in front of all the people that were there for him and was just saying that, to keep praying for him, that it wasn't over yet. She had said at one point during her kind of arguments for a bond that, according to the guards, Darius is, and, because of the seriousness of his charges, he is in cells with people that are, charged with those same serious type crimes. But that according to the guards, when she goes down to visit him, he's kind of been a light to people in the jail and has tried to maintain a positive attitude. And so it was definitely a very emotional day in court. And when you hear the gravity of the charges, which there is a mother who lost her life, it's an obviously since the beginning, it has been an overall terrible situation. And you just hate the senseless loss of life. And so it's just a sad situation. It was a very emotional day in court. But I think even though he was denied bond, I think there were positives for his defense team. The judge that complimented his defense team multiple times and said they've done a great job at even speeding up this trial and things like that. So
we'll be praying for Darius Miles. We'll be praying for the entire case, really, the Harris family as well, because that's really where their focus should be, losing Miss Jamea Harris. So just a tragic situation all around. Katie, thank you for going to the courtroom yesterday for BamaCentral and getting kind of the inside scoop and putting that out. You can follow BamaCentral for all the updates on this case, and you can follow Katie Windham at @KatieWindham_ on the Twitter machine for any updates. Katie, that's about all my notes for today. We've run out of time, so and I think you got to get ready for some softball tomorrow. So I really appreciate you hanging out with me. Tell all the people, I guess, anywhere else they can follow you and all about your work, I guess.
Yeah, just on Twitter, I'll be at softball all weekend. If they make it to Oklahoma City, I will go out there as well, which 2 years ago, that is one of the most that I tell people a lot that Montana Fouts Perfect Game might be my favorite sporting event I've ever gotten to cover. And just the whole thing at Oklahoma City is super fun, especially if you're a college softball fan. Alabama baseball just took a 5-1 lead on Auburn. Of course, it was Andrew Pinckney. Just a side note, I have the TV on over there.
Oh, you're good. I'm watching the same thing.
But yeah, just follow me on Twitter. I'll be keeping up with softball whenever football stuff and SEC Media Days cranks up. I'll be all over that as well. So
thank you so much for your time today, Katie. I really appreciate you hanging out with us on the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.
Thanks, Joe.
Yes, ma'am. That's Katie Windham hanging out with us, and we're going to wrap it up right there. Exactly like she said, it's 5-1 Alabama over Auburn. Andrew Pinckney getting an RBI. Tommy Seidel setting up the fourth run. Seidel is 3 for 3 on the day, 2 RBIs. So the Tide is rolling up 5-1, bottom of the fourth inning with 2 outs left up there at Hoover. We did get it straight. If Alabama wins, they're going to play the loser of Vanderbilt and Florida, which can be seen at 8 p.m. tonight. That'll be the late game. It'll be the fourth game tonight. So you'll be able to keep up with Alabama at the SEC tournament. Big thanks to Katie Windham joining me on the program today. You can follow her at @KatieWindham_. She's going to keep you abreast of all of the softball information over the weekend. And really, you just want to follow her for all the Alabama coverage that you can. Big thanks to BamaCentral.com putting us on today. We are a part of the BamaCentral Broadcasting Network. I want to shout out our other podcasts, All Things Bama and Blue Collar Unplugged. You can listen to those as a part of the BamaCentral Broadcasting Network as well. So that's going to do it for our show today. We'll be back with you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Hey, Terrell Lewis asks, where's our 30 for 30? Terrell, the dynasty's not over yet. Terrell Lewis, come on, the dynasty's not over. You'll get your piece. It's going to be a 4-part 30 for 30, but the dynasty's got to go for another 10 years. So we'll get into that tomorrow with the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com. We're going to keep going on SEC baseball, and we'll talk regionals as well, super regionals as well for softball. For Joe Gaither, hey, that's me, and the listener, hey, that's you. It's going to be a great Wednesday. It's going to be a great Thursday. I hope you all have a great day. Roll Tide.